Hello everybody and welcome back to Hypixel Skyblock, and in today's video we are going to be talking about the best ways that you can get more foraging XP in Hypixel Skyblock. Foraging is honestly one of the worst skills to grind in Hypixel Skyblock. It basically consists of you running around and hitting trees over and over again and waiting for them to break, which is not very fun, and actually requires a surprising amount of attention to make sure that you're actually hitting the logs in comparison to stuff like farming, where you can just run in a straight line. It's really annoying, takes a long time, and is generally regarded as one of people's least favorite skills, but I've been asked to make this video, so here goes. I'm going to be talking about ways that you can do it with max setup, ways that you can do it passively, and ways that you can do it on a budget, so go to the timestamps down in the description for all of those things. So, before we get into the video, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel, because every subscriber counts, and let's get into the video. So, where should you farm? You should definitely farm for foraging XP in this dark oak forest. The trees are much thicker, meaning with one hit, you can take down a lot more of the trees, and then you can go and get a lot more of the tree like that. So, at least until there is some sort of update to foraging, which I will definitely cover on this channel, the dark oak thicket is the best place to farm foraging XP. You can actually refresh the lobby a couple times by just leaving and rejoining if you see that it's full. This is actually a relatively empty one. There aren't that many people grinding foraging in it right now, which is pretty good, because when there are tons of people doing it, then you have to wait for trees to regrow a lot more often, which becomes a real big pain. So I highly recommend you just go for it while there are fewer people in the lobby. This can be done by playing at off-peak times, or just by finding a lobby that is much emptier than others. You also want to tend to target the largest trees, and of course, the ones closest to you. Like this is a very thick tree, and I would then also target that because it's close to me, and this one because it's right next to that, and then just keep going. Try to find a nice little rotation. An aspect at the end can really help you out with that because it helps you teleport around quicker. So let's say I use the aspect at the end, I can just teleport through here to this tree instead of having to run all the way over. Go there, then I can run over here, then I can teleport over to this tree, and you get into a great rhythm, but it does take a lot of time. So let's talk about the maxed setup. I'm not using the max setup right now. I'm actually using mostly the budget setup. But I highly recommend you use Young Dragon Armor. This full set bonus will get you to 500 walk speed, because you see it adds 100% walk speed cap, and when paired with a God Potion, it shouldn't be that hard to get yourself to 500 walk speed like you see down there. I also recommend Godbot, like I just said, because if we look into the effects tab, toggle potion effects, you're going to want to make sure that all of your speed ones are on, as well as your foraging XP boost. So this is a foraging XP boost potion. It will give you more foraging XP while you are farming, so I highly recommend you have that potion on. If you can't afford a Godbot, I'll talk about that in the budget section, but since this is max setup, I definitely recommend you have that. I'm also going to talk about pets a little bit later in the video, but for now, let's talk about which axe you should have. You should definitely have a tree capitator like you see I'm using right now, but there are different types of tree capitators. The most expensive tree capitators are going to be legendary. They're going to be upgraded to legendary with a recom, and they're going to have a specific reforge on them. So if we look at the reforges that are offered for axes over here, you'll see that there are actually two reforges that are good for axes. That is the Moil log and the Toil log. The Moil log is cheaper and easier. That only gives you 1% foraging XP, and it's different for each level. And the Toil log will give you a lot more foraging XP per level. So let's say Moil on this axe right now is giving me an extra 2% foraging XP. But let's say I put Toil on it, as you're about to see. Let's say I buy a Toil log and put it right on this axe. Toil log, reforge. Now, you'll see it's giving me 4%. So I definitely recommend, if you're going for the max setup, you upgrade to that Toil log if you do have the money, because it will definitely be worth it. It does cost a significant amount more, but 100% worth it. And of course, if you want to get a little bit of extra, I think it's like 2% extra or something, you can also recom your Tricapitator. This is really where you start to get a little bit crazy because recoms are expensive, but if you're looking to do this as fast as possible, which if you're in the max setup area, you probably are, you will want to recom your Tricapitator, because if you look on the auction house for Tricapitators, the Legendary Decapitator gives you 5% foraging XP with Toil rather than 4%, so that extra 1% can actually make a difference. And finally, I recommend you have some sort of personal compactor. I've got a personal compactor 4000 just for demonstration with dark oak in it. That way, you're not constantly stopping to go into the crafting menu and craft stuff, which will just make it a lot faster and easier, so definitely get a personal compactor. So let's talk about what you do on a budget setup now. So with a budget setup, I will still recommend Young Dragon Armor, but really any set that gives you high speed will work. Since you are using a God bot, you don't really need to worry that much about speed. Let's say I switch to something like Mastiff Armor, which doesn't really have any particular speed benefits. I still have 340 speed just because of the God bot. But as you can see, it is visibly slower than I would be with the Young Dragon Armor, because, I mean, that's still like 160 less speed. So I definitely recommend you use Young Dragon Armor if you can afford it. It's not that expensive, so definitely try to get it if you can. But if you're on a budget, it's not strictly necessary. You will also be using a Decapitator, but you can have it just on Epic and with the Moil log, which will be a lot cheaper to get because it's only 50,000 coins. The Decapitator is pretty essential. I don't recommend you use a Jungle Axe. If you're super early game, a Jungle Axe will do fine. Jungle Axe is basically a cheaper Decapitator, but I highly recommend if you're going to use a Jungle Axe, use a Jungle Axe plus a Golden Axe with efficiency 5. That way, while you're waiting for the Jungle Axe's cooldown, you can also chop trees with your Golden Axe. But if you're going to be grinding foraging, it's definitely worth the investment into a Decapitator. But the God Pot can be a little bit expensive, and if you're willing to spend that money on the armor rather than God Pots, I highly recommend you look at Foraging XP Boost Potions. As you can see on the auction, you can buy normal Foraging XP Boost Potions, and then brew them up to these Foraging XP 3 potions, which gave you 20% more Foraging XP. Like I said, very worth it. These will last less time, but can end up being slightly cheaper, possibly, if you're not planning on foraging for all 24 hours of your God Pot. But I highly recommend you get a God Pot. It will be a lot more useful, and since if you have stuff like a boost cookie, or even not, it will save when you log off. It only counts the time that you're online, so I highly recommend you use a God Pot if you can afford it, because it's just so much better. And of course, always, personal compactor will make a huge difference in your foraging work. Okay, well, now let's talk about the thing that a lot of people have asked about. Ocelot versus Monkey. The Ocelot and Monkey are two pets that are both fantastic for foraging, but one of them is better than the other for different situations. So people have done tests, and the Ocelot pet and Monkey pet actually give very similar XP gains, because the Ocelot's 30% XP boost is made up for by the Monkey's Decapitator reduction in cooldown. So I highly recommend, if you have the money, the Monkey pet will probably give you a little bit more, and it just makes it a better experience in general. It will also give you a little bit more money, which, I mean, you're probably not in foraging for the money, but if you are, the Monkey pet is definitely a better choice as well. The Ocelot is better if you are on a budget, though. The Ocelot is a lot cheaper and can be helpful if you want to save some money. If you are going to use an Ocelot, though, I highly recommend you take a level 1 Monkey and put it with XP share, so that way you are still getting that leveling up, and that can also make you some money, and just have a Monkey pet leveled up when you're ready to switch to it. But otherwise, you can just use the Ocelot pet because it is cheaper. So I would recommend the Monkey pet if you are looking for a max setup, or the Ocelot if you're more on a budget. But let's talk about passive setups. You can't have minions for foraging, they're not that good. Foraging minions only give 48 foraging XP per hour, which is really bad, and even with enchanted lava buckets, that's what the 48 XP per hour comes from. That's 35,000 XP per day with 31 minions, which is the max number of minion slots, I believe. At that rate, it would take you just under 1,545 days to level 50, which that's 4.23 years, so yeah, probably not that good an option. Thankfully, there are other ways to get foraging XP from minions, and while they are semi-AFK, you're running around and chopping logs like this on your island while the minions are generating them. If you do want a guide on that, I will help you out with that in future. Let me know in the comments. It's kind of like this semi-AFK netherwort farm, where you're really only clicking and holding one side button, but it is still a decent amount of work. So the completely passive methods like minions are not that great. But what about another method that is not foraging and is much faster? Let's talk about Jerry boxes. So if you may have seen Akinsoft's recent video, that will be linked down below probably as well. But he managed to get Foraging 50 in just 5 hours by buying Jerry boxes. Unfortunately, this is ridiculously expensive, and I do not recommend it for basically anyone, unless you are a YouTuber that just wants to get Foraging without having to actually grind. Like, for Fraction, wants to get Foraging 50, would probably be the right play. Or Agensoft fits perfectly for him because he's got tons of coins and wants Foraging 50. But it does cost billions of coins, but if you are willing to spend that many coins, I highly recommend you look at Jerry boxes instead of actually foraging for getting some Foraging XP, as they can give you a bunch of skill XP, including Foraging XP. So, unfortunately, besides that, there aren't that many more ways to get Foraging XP. If I missed an important one, let me know down in the comments, and I'll try to make an update video if this one does well. I'll look into some more passive methods with minions for a future video, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.